So, there's been a whole lot of discussion about Amendment 2 on this year's ballot. Here's my rundown of the decision that you have to make. So what is Amendment 2? Amendment 2 is a constitutional amendment to the Alabama State Constitution, which adjusts the way that state parks in Alabama are funded and operated. The amendment you're voting on has two distinct parts. Part 1 of the amendment keeps the Alabama State Legislature from taking money generated at state parks and spending it elsewhere. In the last several years, lawmakers in Montgomery have taken $15 million out of state park coffers to cover budget shortfalls in other areas. As a result of this raiding of their budget, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the agency that oversees the state parks, had to close 5 state parks last year, and a lot of the other ones in the state have fallen into disrepair. Because the agency's budget is always at risk of being plundered, long-term planning from year to year can be pretty difficult. Part 1 has almost unanimous support from both citizens and lawmakers in Alabama. It's Part 2 that's causing all the controversy. Part 2 allows the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources of Alabama to hire non-state entities to run certain services at state parks. That sounds pretty sketchy. What does it mean? This part of Amendment 2, which is definitely kind of confusing, is changing a small bit of language from another amendment passed by Alabama voters back in 1998. That amendment, passed nearly 20 years ago, allowed for $110 million in bond monies to go to the state parks for some much needed renovations. Now that bond money went all over the state to a bunch of different parks, but not all of them. And as part of the deal that the state parks made to get that $110 million they needed so desperately, they said that they would only use state employees at any of the parks that got that bond money. But this put them in kind of a weird position, because if they used any of that bond money to buy toilets at a state park in 1999, to this day, they can't have food trucks at that park because they're non-state entities. That bond money was not used in all of the state parks. So there's a lot of parks all over the state where non-state entities, private contractors, are used to run things like food vending, canoe rentals, and golf course maintenance. All the second part of this amendment does is allow the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to contract out services in state parks where this bond money was spent 17 years ago. Now, opponents to this amendment say that the only reason they had to take out the $110 million bond in the first place was to fix all the damages done by the private companies that were running the parks during the 1980s and 90s. If Amendment 2 does not pass, then it's possible for state lawmakers to rob the state parks of some of their funds next year. Also, private companies will not be allowed to operate at some of the state parks. If Amendment 2 does pass, then up to $50 million will be protected for the state parks, and the state will be allowed to negotiate with private contractors to run some of the operations and maintenance at some of the parks. So, I can't tell you how to vote. I can only hopefully make it a little easier to understand. For AL.com, I'm Ian Hoppe.